Make sure y'all stay on point with
The Puncher's Point. What is good, y'all? Welcome back to The Puncher's Point. We are back at it with a post-fight breakdown. This time, David Benavidez defeats David Morrell to remain undefeated, improve to 30-0, and he defeated him by a unanimous decision. Now, before we get into this fight, before we get into grading, I do want to give a personal apology. I want to give an apology to everybody because I said that this fight was going to end in a knockout either way, and I was clearly wrong. With the bad blood that both of these guys had, I had a feeling, I thought that David Morrell was going to knock him out. I thought with the bad blood, he was going to use that to his advantage, and we were going to see David Benavidez get back on the knockout streak. But I was sadly mistaken because this was a war. And I mean, in my opinion, 10 years down the line, I think we're going to look at this as a boxing classic. I think this is one of the best fights that we have had in a decade. And I truly mean that. Now, with that being said, let's get straight into the grade. And we're going to talk about fight strategy. As far as the grade for the overall performance in itself, I got to give it a 9. I mean, both of these guys came in here and both of these guys basically said what they were going to do. Both these guys wanted to be aggressive, go in there, push the pace, and be the aggressor. And both of them had their moments of doing that. Now, for everybody that was wondering, originally when I was watching this fight, I was also watching something on TV, so I was also distracted, kind of basically turning my eyes towards the TV and to the phone. Now, when I first graded this fight, I'm not going to lie to y'all. Y'all are going to call me crazy. I thought I had it 114, 111, around there, David Morrell. And then I was like, let me go back and actually rewatch this fight because overall, there were just parts that I missed, some lags, tiny stuff in general. So I went back and I rewatched the fight right after it was over. And my final assessment of the fight, I had a 114, 112 David Benavidez. For everybody who's saying that this fight was a robbery, or for anybody who's saying that this fight was a total domination by David Benavidez, I need to clear up something. David Benavidez was the stronger puncher in this fight. This goes with strategy. What I really liked about David Benavidez, he used his body punching very efficiently, and I think that was his key. Basically, just keep on targeting the body, get David Morrell tired. One of the keys I had for David Benavidez was to test David Morrell, and boy, did he ever. And David Morrell proved that he was all for the test. Now, the other thing I said was basically boxing side. One fighter, Benavidez, was an inside fighter. Morrell was an outside fighter. And when it got to the points where it was on the inside, I feel David Benavidez did a very good job of flustering him on the inside. However, there were also moments where Morrell would counterpunch him on the inside and then turn it into an outside fight. And I thought David Morrell did a very, very good job of that. Now, here's what I need to make perfectly clear. When you watch a fight, turn the commentators off, okay? Because the commentators are going to be biased towards one fighter or the other. I hate to say it, but it's true. Second of all, I'm sorry, but I know David Benavidez is the stronger puncher, but a lot of those punches that he was landing were landing on the arms and everything like that. And I'm not going to lie, those punch stats were very, very questionable because I feel like there were some punches that David Benavidez was landing on the arms that they were counting. And then David Morrell would do the same exact thing and nobody would respond. Nobody would say nothing. And on top of that, they wouldn't even count the punches. I'm sorry, but some of those rounds, that punch count was pretty questionable. If you go back and you watch that fight, and if you go back on YouTube and you watch that fight, for the fight that's zoomed in, if you go and look at it, David Morrell landed a lot more than what people think. I mean, they both pieced each other up in this fight, but for some reason, everybody has this weird explanation that David Benavidez destroyed him when that's clearly not the case. And for the judge that voted 118, 108, I'm sorry, you're just plain wrong. You're just plain wrong. So here's what I need to let you guys know, okay? Doesn't mean a fighter is throwing hard punches on somebody's arm and they're throwing it and they're hitting them while their hands are up. Does not mean they're landing punches. And if we're going to count those as landed punches for Benavidez, you got to go back and you got to do the same thing for Morrell. If we're not counting arm punches as real punches, because we all know that those aren't punches or they shouldn't be counted in the sport of boxing, then you got to take away half of Benavidez's hits because a lot of those punches that David Benavidez was landing, he was landing on those arms. Now, here's what I will say. David Benavidez, I talked about his body shots, how those were very, very effective. And I believe there were moments where David Morrell was kind of getting fatigued from those body shots. His uppercuts were deadly. And I really wish he stick with those uppercuts. I really wish that he set up more with those uppercuts. What I really loved from David Benavidez was the fact that he would disguise his punches. So he would either use feints to open up David Morrell and target his head, and a lot of those feints would start from the body, and he would and it would get David Morrell to drop his hands, and he would go up top. And a lot of it was basically distracting David Morrell, placing his hands in certain position, his body in certain positions to make it look like one punch. In reality, it was a whole different one. I got to give David Benavidez a lot of credit for that because he fought a smart fight. Now, what did David Morrell do to counter that? Well, I said David Morrell, he needs to box him on the outside. He needs to use his footwork. And at the times where David Morrell was using his footwork, I think it was working. I said it. David Morrell, I feel like boxing ability wise, I gave the edge to him. But if we were talking about pure physicality, aggression, just power, I gave that to Benavidez. And I feel like when it came to footwork, David Morrell did a very, very good job of using that footwork to get out of trouble. There were a lot of times in this fight where David Morrell was in the corner and he would use counter punching to get out of the corner, or he would use his footwork. And there were a lot of times where David Benavidez just wouldn't catch him. I feel like in this fight, David Benavidez was landing the harder punches, some good 2, 3 punch combinations, but David Morrell was throwing more 5, 6 punch combinations. And there were punches that David Morrell was landing that I don't think people saw. So overall, both of these guys had a great strategy. I think where David Benavidez went wrong in this fight was I feel like sometimes he could just be a sitting duck. When a guy becomes the aggressor, he just holds his guard up. And I'm sorry, that's not defense. You can't just put your hands up and as a guy's teeing off on you and he's hitting your arms, you can't just think that's good defense because it's not. And he had his moments of slipping, he had his moments of counterpunching, and he even had his moments of footwork. But overall, for the majority of that fight, there were times where I feel like David Benavidez was just a sitting duck. And as far as David Morrell, his problem was when he would feel the power of Benavidez. When you feel that power of Benavidez is the problem. When he would feel the power of Benavidez, he would basically be complacent. He would be a lot more cautious. I think you should be cautious in those types of fights. But I really would have liked to see David Morrell match him more as far as firepower. As far as, if you're going to throw these hard punches, I'm going to throw some of my best punches at you as well. And there were moments where he did that. So overall, if we're talking about strategy, I got to give it a 9. Both guys had a very smart strategy for this fight. But overall, David Benavidez, I feel like he won maybe like a round or two more than Morrell. And if you guys want what I had the round and the score for the fight graded, I could tell you guys right now because I had it listed. So basically, when I was grading this fight, the way I had it was this. Round one, I gave to Benavidez. Round two and three, I gave to David Morrell. From rounds 4 to 7, I gave it to Benavidez. Rounds 8 and 9, I gave it to Morrell. 10, I gave it to Benavidez. 11, I gave it to Morrell. And 12, I gave it to Benavidez, making it a 114-112 victory for Benavidez. Now, I want to talk about the 11th round before we get to excitement. For the 11th round, David Morrell used a very, very good veteran tactic and technique to knock down David Benavidez. Foot placement. He used foot placement to throw David Benavidez off balance. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of controversy whether or not that was a real knockdown or not. And then after the knockdown, to end the round, David Benavidez started gaining momentum. The bell rang, and then bink, David Morrell, who had a late hit, and the ref took away a point. So overall, it was a 9-8 round for David Morrell, in my opinion. And I feel like in this type of fight, I feel like, in my opinion, it didn't look like a knockdown. But then again, I could be wrong. And at the same time, that late hit, I understand it. I do. I really do. Do I feel like it's tough? I feel like the ref just gave him no warning. I feel like he could have. It's tough. It really is a hard thing. I personally think that, in my opinion, I think a hard warning would have been good in that scenario. And as far as the knockdown, I would not count that as a knockdown. So overall, I would have gave that maybe like a 10-9 round to David Morrell. But obviously, the judges had a different way of scoring it, and the referee had a different way of reffing that. So with that being said, let's go to excitement. 10. Straight 10. I mean, I'm going to be honest, this was one of the most exciting fights I've seen in a very, very long time. Both guys came in ready. Both guys came in as aggressors. See, what makes this different from Tyson Fury and Usyk and Bivol versus Beterbiev is both of these guys were aggressors, and both of these guys from round 1 to round 12 are looking to win. You know, it wasn't like, oh, one guy took over the early rounds, then another guy caught up in the middle. It wasn't like that. Both of these guys wanted to rip each other's heads off. For every single round, they were looking to knock each other out. It wasn't one looking to just, use his, it wasn't one just looking to, cruise by and around or anything like that. Both of these guys, every single round, was looking to hit each other with the best punch possible. And what I really love about it, it wasn't just a brawl in the middle of the ring. They also had technique to go along with it. And in my opinion, I think that's what makes it a very, very good fight. And on top of that, we had the knockdown, we had the controversy, we had the action, we had the bad blood. I mean, it lived up to everything. We said this was going to be a good fight. We knew David Morrell was a dog. We knew David Benavidez was a monster. So we knew when these two stepped into the ring, they were going to bring fireworks. We just didn't realize. We thought we might have got the cheap Walmart fireworks. We got the exclusive ones that you can't get into the country. Overall, these two lit it up. And I'm going to be honest, this was one of the most exciting fights I have seen in the past decade. So, excitement, 10, easily. Now, as far as the stakes of this fight, I mean, the winner was going to get a shot at the undisputed light heavyweight championship, but there were other stakes on the line as far as were both of these guys even ready for the winner of Beterbiev and Bivol? Beterbiev and Bivol are proven 175-pound champions. They're proven that they can beat the absolute best, and they've proven that they are the two best, and especially Beterbiev. He's proven that he is the best light heavyweight at this current moment. We'll see what happens when they go for the rematch. But the question was, could these two guys, whoever wins this fight, could they go in there and could they prove that they have what it takes to beat those types of guys? And in my opinion, yes and no. I think that they proved that they have the heart and they proved that they have the ability to make it a competitive fight against these guys. But as far as power, I'm sorry, since Benavidez has moved up to 175, his power has not been the same. It's just a fact. It has not been the same. And I feel like if he goes in there against somebody like a Beterbiev, I don't think it's I think that power is going to be too much. I don't think his power is going to translate to Beterbiev. And if he goes in there with somebody like Bivol, I'm worried that if David Morrell was able to show in a lot of moments in this fight that he was the better boxer in terms of boxing ability, I feel like Bivol is just going to make it even more tough on him. So I'm going to honestly say no. I don't think this fight proved that both of these guys were right, but I think it proved that they can make it competitive. And if they just critique and they tweak some things, that these two could possibly be the future of 175. And the last thing to Benavidez, every single time David Benavidez steps in that ring, he's always improving. I never look at Benavidez as far as boxing ability. I never look at Benavidez and go, "Oh, he sucked in this fight. His boxing ability was every single fight. David Benavidez is improving, and I feel like a lot of people are underestimating David Benavidez because of early in his career. When in reality, he's a whole different. He's turning into a whole different boxer, and I don't even think he's hit his prime yet. So we don't know what could happen. He could hit his prime against Bivol versus or Beterbiev, and he could beat one of them. So I think overall, this is kind of a thing where we're gonna have to see where Benavidez goes from here and how much he's gonna improve. But as of right now, I don't think that he'll be ready for Bivol or Beterbiev. I still think that remains questionable. So as far as the stakes, I'm gonna give it an 8.5. I think that's a fair grade to give it. I'm gonna give it an 8.5 because the winner was going to get a shot at the undisputed light heavyweight championship. And as far as stakes, I also feel like this was a fight to see how well these two were able to switch on and develop and how good they really were at 175. So I think 8.5 is a good number to put that at. And last but not least, the impact. How does this impact the sport of boxing? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. It does have a decent impact on the sport of boxing. You see, the question was, what can David Morrell do against competition like David Benavidez? If he gets cracked, is he going to crumble under the pressure? And I always thought David Morrell was a dog. I always thought David Morrell was a dog, and he proved to me that he was. Now, as far as David Benavidez, slowly but surely, He has beaten a few world champions, but you look at his resume, Darrell, Andre, Caleb Plant. Now you put Morrell on that list. Uh, Vozdik. I mean, he's building himself a decent resume. I'm not gonna lie to you, with some good names on that resume. And as far as the impact of boxing, I believe this fight was good enough to put David Benavidez potentially top 10 pound for pound. So, in my opinion, I'm gonna give the impact an 8. I think it deserves an 8 because I do feel like now all of a sudden you have a guy who could potentially be in the top 10 pound for pound. And if he already is, he could definitely rise a little bit. And we also have a guy that now he has options. Now this impacts the sport of boxing because we obviously know he's going to get an undisputed title shot against the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol. But a lot of people are talking about Canelo as well. That's never stopped. Now, with that being said, the total for this fight is going to be 8.88. And if we compare that to the rankings that we have so far for season 4, 8.88 is now the number one fight for season 4. It topped Alexander Usyk versus Tyson Fury 2, which was at 8.59. So that's where we have this fight, 8.88. And I honestly think it deserves it. I honestly think it deserves. I think the excitement brought it up because this was an incredibly exciting fight. I think it had everything you wanted as far as an exciting fight. And I think overall there was enough stakes, there was enough impact, and there was a good strategy behind both fighters to make this a great fight. Now, I do want to touch up on something a little bit. Guys, I need y'all to do me a favor, okay? To all the Canelo fans, to all the Benavidez fans, do me a favor. Stop fighting. Honestly, okay? Because look, Breezy was right. This fight is not going to happen. Benavidez and Canelo are not going to fight. In my opinion, that fight will never happen. But every single time Benavidez fights, Canelo fans storm whatever post that is and go, "Oh, he's not ready for Canelo." Canelo's probably laughing right now. Canelo makes easy work of him. If Morrell was able to do this, what do you think Canelo's gonna do? And every single time Canelo fights and he doesn't get a knockout, yeah, David Benavidez will destroy him. I think Canelo's out of his prime. He better not step in there with David Benavidez. He's ducking. I'm sick and tired of hearing it, honestly, because the fight is not going to happen. You got to understand. Canelo Alvarez, as of right now, is chasing Terrence Crawford. Fun fact, I am not a big fan of that fight at all. But that's what he's chasing right now. If he can't get that Crawford fight, there's no way he's fighting Benavidez. And last but not least, Benavidez already made the jump to 175, so he's going after guys in that division right there. So unless Canelo jumps up to 175 and decides to become undisputed over there, that fight's not happening. I just can't see it happening. But I mean, look, you never know. Anything could happen in the sport of boxing, but as far as the way the sport of boxing has been, that fight does not happen. So, in my opinion, I think everybody needs to kind of slow their roll a little bit. The fans that Canelo has and the fans that David Benavidez has, they both got to stop coming at each other because y'all got bigger and better things to worry about. Okay, Canelo got to go in there. If Canelo makes that fight with Terrence Crawford, that's going to be a huge fight that Canelo fans can look forward to. I'm not the biggest fan of that fight, though, to be honest with you. And as far as David Benavidez, he gets a shot at the undisputed light heavyweight championship. Focus on the winner of Bivol versus Beterbiev. Be more concerned about that instead of Canelo. But I swear that's the first thing that comes to their minds. For Canelo fans, it's Benavidez. For Benavidez fans, it's Canelo. And it's unfortunate for both of y'all because that fight is most likely not going to happen. So we already know what's next for David Benavidez, but the question is, what's next for David Morrell? He had a great fight against David Benavidez, probably David Benavidez' toughest opponent yet. So what's next for David Morrell? And in my opinion, I think David Morrell should stick at 175, but I think he should get a few more wins under his belt. I would really like to see him fight guys like Callum Smith. Um, maybe Zerto if Zerto wanted to go back down to 175, but I think he's getting ready for cruiserweight and all. They might make a fight with Jai Opataya. Maybe Usyk drops back down to cruiserweight and they fight. So it's really complicated over there. I would really like to see Callum Smith. Vozdik would be a good one. Joe Smith. Um, there's some names. Yeah, there's some names. Marcus Brown is another one. There's some guys that he can fight in that division for sure. I think Callum Smith would be a good fight. I think that David Morrell just needs a little more experience, in my opinion, and I think overall we might see him in a title picture at 175. But I think he needs more experience. I think he needs to fight some of those more experienced guys and kind of get his feet wet in that division and fight some real 175 pounders that could be legitimate threats. But overall, that's my whole take on David Benavidez and David Morrell. I thought that was an amazing fight. I feel like there was a lot of bias towards David Benavidez, whether that was commentary or stats. Those stats to me were a little bit questionable. I feel like David Morrell didn't get as much credit as he should have in this fight, but at the same time, I feel like David Benavidez did win this fight, and David Benavidez proved that he is a monster. So, I mean, credit to both guys for making this fight happen. Get into the ring. They had bad blood and they settled it in the ring, and that's all you can ask for as boxers, and that's all you can ask for as boxing fans. So, shout out to both of those guys. Both of those guys are warriors, in my opinion. And with that being said, it's time that we wrap this episode up. Make sure y'all tune in to the next episode. I believe the next fight that we are going to be reacting to is Clarissa Shields versus Danielle Perkins. We just uploaded the reel for the prediction episode, so make sure y'all go check that out on Instagram, Reddit, Facebook, YouTube, Threads, X or Twitter. Make sure y'all check it out on all of those platforms. Make sure y'all check out those platforms in general for all of our content. Make sure y'all check out the YouTube and the podcast platforms for all of y'all who aren't tuning into the podcast. Definitely tune into the podcast. It's definitely a place where you can go and listen, and it's all really convenient for y'all. So make sure y'all tune into the podcast on all podcast platforms. And with that being said, I need y'all to do me one more favor along with the favor I just asked all the Canelo and Benavidez fans. As a matter of fact, to all the Canelo and Benavidez fans and all the boxing fans, whether you're new or you guys have been boxing fans for years, make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point.